Steve Bannon, we've not seen much of you in the British media for a long time, but you are portrayed, when they write about you.
That's because the British media is dumb and lazy. If you read The Guardian, at least the U.S. edition, you'll catch a lot of what we're stand because we're at the tip of the spear of the populist nationalist movement, and of course, what the Tories stand for. And British politics is a disaster right now. The Tories stand for absolutely nothing. They're going to get smoked, as I've been saying. They're going to get smoked when the next election comes up, and then there'll be some formation of true British politics. I think around more of a populist nationalist mentality. The reason that we're not covered as much is very simply, I don't think the British political press understand. They're dumb, they're lazy, and they're bought off. They want to continue to push the narrative that's out there. And quite frankly, the United Kingdom, as you saw from the financial crisis you had last year, is really in it now. I tell you, really bad.
Yeah, we're not in a great place.
Not a great place. You're in a terrible place. Not a great place is too nice. You're in a terrible place. Rubini came out today. The professor, I think, is up at Harvard, that talks about the global capital markets. The British got the preamble to it last summer. When you try to have, tax cuts that are really unfunded tax cuts are fine. But you can't do that when you have this social spending. You've got to get control of your budget and actually look at where the spending's going to come from. And your pensions were totally exposed. Remember, right now, your pensions, you know this as a capital markets guy, there's so much hinky stuff in those pensions, so much derivatives to try to juice the returns and zero interest rates. The whole pension, all the pensions in the UK, the bottom could blow out. We're in a financial economic crisis that's only going to get worse.
And in terms of debt, I mean, America just seems to go on borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. I mean, the latest Biden, massive incentives for green energy. I mean, he
spent 10, 12. The Congressional Budget Office, which is not a populist, it's center left in Congress, came out $19 trillion of additional debt in the next 10 years, essentially $2 trillion of unfunded spending. Right, the Federal Reserve is just going to print money again, and so it gets to over $50 trillion. The interest payments on our debt, because we borrowed all this at zero interest rates, are going to be over $1 trillion. It's not sustainable. We're in a system like in the 1930s after the Great Depression, that we're very similar to the 1930s, both geopolitically and also on the capital market side. You can't sustain this. It's not sustainable.
And this is interesting because 2016, the year we had Brexit, the year we had Trump, these big,
what a historic
populist revolts, amazing days.
Yes.
And yet, when you think about it, Steve Bannon, they happened at a time of relatively benign economics.
Well, the storm was there. What Brexit was able to do is take your sovereignty back, although you were fought for 4 more years. And as you know, President Trump, look at what President Trump did. In 2019, we had really the golden age. We had 3% growth, right? We had the lowest unemployment ever. Wages for working class people were rising. But most important, when nobody gives Trump credit, we took $1 trillion off the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve had exploded under Obama to take care of the financial crisis of 2008. Yeah. We took the balance sheet from $4.5 trillion down to almost $3.5 trillion, which created a headwind for Trump's growth, but he powered through it. Remember, Trump gave you 3 years of prosperity and 4 years of peace. The Chinese Communist Party, with the pandemic in 2020, ruined it. But those economic policies are the economic policies.
I think Trump.
And you guys got fought. Look, Brexit passed in 2016. When were you actually able to effectuate truly getting your sovereignty back, and particularly your economic sovereignty, which I would argue with Boris Johnson that this Singapore and the Thames is not what Brexit was about. It's about returning Great Britain to be a manufacturing powerhouse, which you can be, with your innovation, your engineering, and quite frankly, the great workers you've got. So,
well, sadly, we haven't done it.
You haven't done
it. But my point, Steve, is this. If we can get big change, political change in 2016, without high inflation, without markets potentially crashing, if we're going economically to the place that you think we are, there are bad times around the corner. And I rather agree with you. This idea that inflation is going to disappear, I don't buy any of it. I don't buy any of it. Does that mean that the ingredients are there in the next couple of years for that kind of populist nationalist revolt?
There is, from the people. There's one difference. Let's be brutally frank. In 2016, we snuck up on them. They didn't really, they laughed at Nigel Farage. They laughed at the Brexit movement, right? I would go to your meetings, there were 50 people, 100 people there, they didn't take it seriously. One year actually got there and galvanized the people in that election. In June, they were in shock. The elites were in total shock. That's why they sat there and fought you for so long. The same with Trump. Trump was never taken seriously. Remember, when I stepped into the campaign in mid-August, he's down by 10 or 12 points. Even the last week, we were down by 5. They never took him seriously. The biggest difference now in the populist nationalist movement and the sovereignty movement, they're waiting for you. the money oligarchs, right, big tech, and particularly the media. The media is totally bought off, even the conservative media. Look at Fox and look at the Daily Telegraph. All they do is propound a neoliberal, neocon order that is not sustainable. Like in the 1930s, that order of the day was not sustainable. This is not sustainable.
Now, I was very interested to see Ron DeSantis. We haven't heard much from Ron DeSantis about the UK, but a big piece in the Times newspaper, DeSantis saying that going to play golf at St Andrews was one of the great moments of his life, analysing that Brexiteers, he compared them to the founding fathers in the USA, because this was the first Brexit after all, but also DeSantis being very critical of the Conservative government, saying they've not delivered Brexit properly. It's left people disappointed. Does DeSantis get this stuff?
First off, let's talk about the Times. It's a Rupert Murdoch. I mean, let's be honest. The Fox is totally blacked out Trump. You're getting softball interviews. You're getting t-ball interviews. You're getting infomercials for those candidates. Ron DeSantis is a good man. He's a patriot. He served his country. He's been an excellent governor.
Yeah.
But the problem is he still looks at the framework that all the Republicans, from Nikki Haley to Tim Scott, they're all good people. But they still have this construct of neocon neoliberalism, right? That worldview cannot survive. We can't finance it. The people in this audience are the ones going to have to write the checks. Their pension funds, their tax money, and their sons and daughters are going to go die on foreign battlefields. And the people of England have to understand right now, if you continue down this path, your sons and daughters are going to be dying in Ukraine, fighting for the Ukrainians to take back Crimea. If that's what the British people want, then continue to back neoliberal neocons.
There's a lot more skepticism here, isn't there, about Ukraine and about giving money?
We're going to go zero money. Cut it all off. You got to. Zelensky. They have to go to the negotiating table and figure this thing out. There's 40,000. What the Defense Department says is 40,000 dead women and children, and they're fighting over the Russian-speaking eastern border of Ukraine and talking about this crazy thing. Biden said, "Oh, the Ukrainians get to decide. They get to decide American foreign policy to go, and they want to take." They want a return of all the territories, including Crimea.
I know.
They want $1 trillion in reparations from the Russians. And more importantly, they're saying we're going to have war crime trials. If I remember my World War II history correctly, Churchill and FDR, Montgomery and Patton, we beat the Nazis first, and then we had the war crime trials. We beat the Japanese Imperial Army first, and then we had the war crime trials. Don't tell a guy he's going to be a war criminal. He's going to fight to the bitter end.
So you think that American public opinion is going to force Biden into zero funding?
Well, first off, the MAGA movement and the Republican minority of MAGA in the House is going to stop the funding. That's where it's first going to come from. I think you're going to see some of the populist stuff join us. We can't afford it. We're talking about right now, you talk about spending. We're talking about $2 trillion in cuts on Medicaid, not Medicare, Social Security, over the next 10 years. We're talking about other social social safety net cuts. We're talking about significant cuts in the defense budget. If you're going to do that to American citizens, and I'm all for cutting Medicaid, you can't be giving $200 billion to the Ukrainians. Right now, we're putting $5 billion a month to pay their pensions and to pay their health care. People in the United States don't have pensions. People in the United States don't have health care. You expect the working class people in this audience are going to write checks so that the Ukrainian government, which is taking 10% of the top.
No, I can see a change.
For your British audience, understand that we're going to fight this. No money to the Ukraine. Make the Ukrainians go to the negotiating table and figure it out. No more killing fields in Ukraine. No more dead women and children fighting over this border dispute that's going to get focused.
I tell you, I mean, in the UK at the moment, there is almost unanimity of view that we're doing the right thing. So your comments,
okay, fine. Okay. Look back to last summer. First off, you can't afford it. It's a fantasy. First off, the guy that runs Commons, the Armed Services Committee at Commons, told us the other day that the British military can last 5 days in a conflict. You're not look, the best ally we've got is Great Britain. And quite frankly, you could put up one combat division. That's coming from your own defense secretary. You've had such massive defense cuts. You're not prepared. The British people are not prepared to pay. And they should understand the days of the United States having Europe as a vassal state militarily are over.
I know.
We're not paying for NATO anymore. I was the one that tip of the spear for President Trump to say, you got to put up to 2% of GDP. And people laughed in my face. The Germans said, well, we can't do that. We have to, by constitutional law, we have to have a balanced budget. I said, dude, we wrote that, or by our Constitution, I said, we wrote that Constitution for you after we beat the Nazis. So don't tell me that the American people don't have pensions, don't have health care, and you do, because we're paying for your defense. Europe has to understand, and the British people, our greatest ally, have to understand, the days of the United States of America underwriting these ridiculous forever wars. We just got out of Afghanistan, Iraq after 20 years, $9 trillion on our budget, on our balance sheet, $9 trillion. Plus, there's like 12, 15,000 dead and another 50,000 wounded. We're having 25 veterans a day kill themselves. So with PTSD, those days are over. We are stopping the funding in Ukraine immediately.
We're going to watch that. Steve, we're here at CPAC. Who wins the nomination, Trump or DeSantis?
Not even close. It's going to be President Trump.